My wife and her male best friend were kidnapped at the same time as me. The kidnappers demanded $40 million to release one person, but she used the money I had worked so hard to earn to rescue her male best friend. Before I died, covered in blood, I begged her to look at me, but Jessica Edwards chose to help her male best friend leave without a backward glance, leaving me to be brutally tortured to death by the kidnappers. Jessica said it was I who blocked her path to her true love. When I opened my eyes again, I was reborn on the day I was supposed to marry Jessica Edwards. Ding! Story Shots reminds you to click the subscribe button at the bottom right corner to read the full novel. Harold, what are we going to do? The Edwards family still wants us to pay $188,000 as a betrothal gift for your uncle, so that Jessica can get in the car with you and get married. The one speaking was my best man and close friend, Liam. His familiar voice pulled me away from the pain of having my limbs severed. I glanced at the bouquet in my hand, unable to believe what I saw, the festive wedding decorations around me. I couldn't help but laugh. I never expected to be reborn on the day I was marrying Jessica Edwards. At this point, I should have already transferred $800,000 to the Edwards family. But on the day of the wedding, when I came to pick up the bride, the Edwards family suddenly changed their mind and added another $100,000 to the betrothal gift. Harold, how can you still be laughing at a time like this? To suddenly come up with over $100,000, the Edwards family is really greedy. I don't even know what's so good about Jessica that makes you so devoted to her. Liam couldn't help but complain, his words laced with a hint of frustration. Harold, have you thought it through? It's just over $100,000, right? Hurry up and transfer the money to my brother. If you don't, I won't marry you. Jessica, wearing a white wedding dress, sat impatiently on the bed. My gaze fell on her male best friend, Clifton Lopez, who was dressed in a suit. Yeah, Harold, it's just over $100,000. If you really love Jessica, what's there to hesitate about? Clifton's eyes were full of mockery and provocation. Exactly, Harold. I see you don't really care about me. I looked at Jessica, whose face was filled with anger, and the scene of the day I was kidnapped flooded back to me. Jessica brought a suitcase full of money but chose to save not me, her husband, but her male best friend first. My eyes were filled with disbelief and heartbreak. Betrayed and engulfed in pain, I asked Jessica why, but Jessica, with a pained expression, helped Clifton up and looked at me with reproach. She said that Clifton had been weak since childhood and wouldn't be able to handle it here. I had good physical strength, so I could hold on a little longer. After saying that, Jessica hurriedly took Clifton away without looking back at me even once. After years of marriage to Jessica, I discovered her close relationship with Clifton only after hiring a private investigator. They had grown up as childhood sweethearts. It was only because Clifton was born prematurely and came from a poor family that they hadn't ended up together. The reason she chose to marry me, Jessica once drunkenly confessed to me, was simply because I had money. After marrying me, she could use my money to pay for Clifton's medical expenses. But even knowing all this in my past life, I still loved Jessica hopelessly. I always thought that as long as I treated Jessica sincerely, she would eventually notice me and recognize my goodness. I wasn't being greedy. I gave my all. I just wanted to have a place in Jessica's heart, even if it was just a little bit. Jessica said she loved the splendor of fireworks, so I spent a fortune to light up the city with fireworks, just to see her smile. But she remained gloomy. Just when I was confused, I unexpectedly saw Clifton had only bought a simple sparkler, yet it made Jessica smile brilliantly. At that moment, I realized in my past life that no matter how hard I tried, Jessica loved Clifton. So even if he gave her a worthless sparkler, she would cherish it. Jessica didn't love me, so no matter how much money and effort I spent to cheer her up, it was just a cold shoulder to my warm face. And when Clifton and I were kidnapped at the same time, the moment Jessica chose to save Clifton without hesitation shattered all my expectations of love for her. Even though I was reborn, I still couldn't forget the feeling of having my limbs severed by the kidnappers and my head being cut off alive. As Jessica's words fell, the new house was silent. The Edwards family looked smug, as if they were sure I would compromise. In front of so many people, I slowly lit a cigarette. Jessica frowned, wanting to scold me. She had always disliked the smell of smoke. But I spoke first, holding the cigarette casually. Since you think I'm not sincere, it's simple. You can go find the man you believe is sincere. I won't marry you. I called my brothers and turned to leave. The Edwards family turned pale, clearly not expecting I would really choose not to marry over that extra 100,000. Harold, if you dare to leave, don't regret it. Jessica's expression was still arrogant. She probably expected me to lower my head and coax her like before. But she didn't know that the Harold who once loved her dearly was already dead. I turned around. It was obvious that Jessica Edwards and her family let out a sigh of relief. They thought I would back down. Jessica softened her tone. Come on, Harold. 100,000 is just a piece of cake for you. Why waste so much time? I coldly smiled and smashed the bouquet in Jessica's face. Jessica was furious. Harold, what are you doing? I sneered. Jessica, you're right. 100,000 is nothing for me. But you, Jessica, are not worth that much to me right now. Remember to prepare my dowry refund. After saying that, I turned and left. Even though I heard Jessica crying, I didn't look back. Once in the car, I called my parents to tell them the wedding was off. Mr. Lopez looked quite surprised. Harold, good for you. You really stood your ground today. But are you sure you're not marrying Jessica? I leaned back on the sofa in the back seat, feeling a sense of clarity. After being reborn, I realized there were many things and people more worthy of my attention than Jessica Edwards. There was no need to waste time on a woman like her. I'm not marrying her anymore. You all can just think of it as a buddy getting sick before. Now that he's well, it's over. Back at home, I hired a cleaner to throw away all the wedding photos of Jessica and me, along with all her belongings, straight into the trash. During the insurance period, I directly hired a professional lawyer to demand that the Edwards family refund me the 800,000 dowry. In this new life, I would no longer be the gullible fool caught between Jessica and Clifton Lopez. When the Edwards family heard I wanted the 800,000 back, they panicked instantly. They didn't want to return the money and didn't want to lose me as their cash cow. So, the Edwards family began to persuade Jessica to come and apologize to me. Jessica came to the villa area where I lived, but before she could even step into the community, she was stopped by the security guard. What's going on? I'm a homeowner here. Do you dare stop me? I'll make sure you lose your job. Clifton stood beside her, playing the role of her protector. Since I had instructed the security in advance, no matter how arrogant Jessica acted, they firmly insisted that she could not prove her homeowner status and would not let her in. Jessica, feeling wronged, called me, her tone a bit awkward as she thought I would still stand up for her like before. Harold, I'm at the entrance of your community. The security guard says I'm not a homeowner here and won't let me in. I answered the phone coldly. You're not a homeowner here. Harold, don't go too far. Do you really think that by threatening me with money, I'll back down? Believe me, if you keep this up, I really won't marry you, Jessica said angrily. I couldn't help but laugh. Even now, Jessica still thought I wanted to marry her. Stop talking nonsense. Quickly refund my 800,000 dowry, and from now on, Jessica, we go our separate ways. Mentioning the 800,000, Jessica's confidence immediately weakened. Clifton couldn't take it anymore. Harold, how can you do this? It's just 800,000. How can it measure your love for Jessica? I chuckled lightly, but inadvertently caught sight of a close-up photo of Jessica and Clifton on my desk, and couldn't help but feel a sense of irony. I hadn't expected that Jessica and Clifton had gotten together so early. Recalling the investigation materials my brothers sent me, they even had a hotel room together the day before our wedding. Jessica even wrote on her alternate account that this time she just wanted to indulge. And after tonight, she would bury her love deep in her heart. I looked at her alternate account, documenting her sweet moments with Clifton, where she painted me as the villain who cruelly separated the fated couple. In fact, in my previous life, Jessica did complain about me, saying that if it weren't for my appearance, she and Clifton might have been together openly long ago. Since I had been reborn, I decided to let her be happy this time. Holding the phone, I felt nothing but sarcasm in my eyes. It's not something that can be measured. Since you and Jessica are so good together, why don't you pay that $800,000 for her? At the mention of the $800,000, Clifton's face turned pale, and Jessica naturally looked pained. Harold, you know Clifton's health condition. Why do you have to use money to humiliate him like this? I'll tell you this. You're just lucky to have been born into a good family. If Clifton had such a good background, he would definitely be 100 times better than you. If the marriage is off, then so be it. I'll tell you after today, even if you, Harold, beg me to marry you, I won't do it. Jessica couldn't bear to see Clifton being wronged and pulled him away. I stood by the window, coldly watching Jessica and Clifton's retreating figures. Jessica thought it was too simple not to marry me. Since the Edwards family refused to return the $800,000 dowry, I decided to call the police. The police came and took the Edwards family, along with Jessica, away. When I saw Jessica again at the police station, her eyes were filled with hurt. Harold, are you really going to be so heartless towards me? Why are you doing this? I couldn't help but laugh at Jessica Edwards, who was acting like a clown and trying to turn the tables on me. Jessica's mother had a fierce expression, looking like a shrew, wanting to rush over and tear me apart, but was held back by the people I brought along, unable to move. Since I was the one who brought up the divorce, not only wouldn't her family return the $800,000, but they also wanted me to pay $1 million as compensation for Jessica's reputation. Jessica's eyes turned red, filled with sorrow. Harold, can we not be mad at each other? I can give up that extra $100,000. Okay? Before I could respond, Jessica's brother angrily said, "Enough, Harold, you stingy guy. You should know when to back off. If I had known you were this stingy, I might as well let Clifton be my brother-in-law." Wilbur, what nonsense are you talking? I've told you countless times. My relationship with Clifton is purely platonic. Jessica sternly scolded her brother, but it only exposed her own guilt. Just a platonic friendship. In my past life, I had heard these words so many times that my ears had calluses. I threw the photos and videos of Jessica and Clifton in bed together in front of the police and the Edwards family. Jessica, open your eyes and see clearly. Is this the pure friendship you have with Clifton? Is a friendship where you can take off your clothes and lie on the same bed? Jessica's face turned pale as she saw those photos. This is impossible. How do you have these photos? Harold, did you hire someone to investigate me? Harold, how could you do this? Didn't you say you would always trust me? Jessica spoke as if I were the unfaithful one. I sneered, thinking about how I got those photos thanks to Clifton. In my past life, when my relationship with Jessica was at its worst, Clifton sent me those videos and photos. I found out that Clifton had a habit of filming in bed. In this new life, all I had to do was have someone copy the files from his phone, and I easily obtained this evidence. Trust? Jessica, do you deserve that? Ask yourself, have I treated you poorly? The day before our wedding, you went to a hotel with Clifton. What kind of reputation does a woman like you have? My eyes were filled with disgust for Jessica. The Edwards family couldn't stay calm upon seeing those videos, and Jessica's father directly slapped her across the face. You idiot, what's so good about that sickly Clifton? How could you be with him? Seeing the truth exposed, Jessica's eyes turned red from crying. Mom and Dad, Clifton and I are truly in love. You can't let money stop us from being together. Hearing his foolish daughter say such words almost gave Jessica's father a heart attack. And I just watched the show, letting the police inform her family that if they didn't return the $800,000, I would sue them for fraud and send them to jail. After all, the Edwards family was fully involved when accepting the betrothal gifts. Faced with the evidence and the police's warning, the Edwards family prepared to take out the $800,000. But when they went to withdraw the money, they found that $50,000 was missing from the account. The Edwards family instinctively wanted to pin the blame on me, But I was already prepared, providing all the transaction records as evidence. The Edwards family and Jessica thought I was a fool, but they didn't know that in my past life, the reason I was toyed with by them was simply because I loved Jessica. In this new life, I had figured it out. I am a businessman. A businessman seeks profit. How could I be schemed against by fools like them? Under police questioning, Jessica finally stammered out that she had transferred all the money to Clifton for his surgery costs. Hearing that the daughter in her eyes had given the betrothal money to someone else, Jessica's mother immediately slapped Jessica several times. Jessica was heartbroken. "Harold, is this your revenge for loving me and then hating me? But you have to know, Clifton has liver cancer, and that surgery cost is crucial for him. I beg you, otherwise he won't survive. Do you think that money is more important than a person's life?" I couldn't help but sneer at Jessica's words. "Stop with the moral high ground. If you care about him so much, why don't you sell your family's house and do good with my money? That would be easy for you. Just today, if you don't return the $800,000 betrothal gift to me, I'll make sure your family goes to jail to be together. Harold, I beg you, as long as you don't pursue Clifton's surgery costs, I promise I'll always stay by your side and won't see Clifton again." Hearing Jessica's words made me feel physically nauseous. "Because of love, you hate me? Do you even deserve that?" I was just about to leave the police station when suddenly I was surrounded by a swarm of social media reporters. And wearing a hospital gown and looking weak, Clifton was the last to walk in. Seeing this scene, an ominous feeling arose in my heart. "Mr. Smith, I heard that you chose to call off the engagement and return the betrothal money because your wife donated $50,000 for her childhood friend's surgery. Is that true?" Another reporter asked me. "But Mr. Smith, we heard that Mr. Lopez is already in the late stages of cancer. With all your assets, why can't you save his life?" "Exactly, Mr. Smith. As the saying goes, saving a life is better than building a 7-story pagoda." These reporters were eager to shove the microphone right into my face. At that moment, Clifton Lopez, wearing a hospital gown, knelt down in front of me, looking pitiful. "Mr. Smith, if you're only withholding help because of Jessica, after giving me $500,000 and then falling out with her, then I'll return this life-saving surgery fee to you now. I only ask you not to hold it against Jessica. If you do, I won't be at peace even in death. Clifton, don't plead with him. He's a petty man, and I only regret having misjudged him in the past." Jessica Edwards glared at me with hatred in her eyes. Looking at these social media reporters, I couldn't help but smile. Saving a life is indeed better than building a 7-story pagoda, but it also depends on who it is. I revealed the video on my phone of Jessica and Clifton entangled in bed. The passionate gasps of the couple made Clifton and Jessica's faces go pale instantly. "How could you have this video?" Clifton had started with me demanding Jessica return the betrothal gift. Even if he figured out I would find out about the $500,000 Jessica gave him, he could never have anticipated I had these videos. "You're despicable. This is an invasion of privacy, and I will sue you." Clifton's instinctive threat seemed so futile in the face of my absolute power. After all, crushing him now would be as easy as squashing an ant. In front of the reporters, I smiled at Jessica and Clifton, looking down at them mockingly. "Ladies and gentlemen, I actually think this cancer patient, Clifton, isn't so easy to kill. After all, he can still sleep with someone else's wife, can't he? As for the $500,000 Jessica gave to Clifton for his surgery, that was my betrothal gift to her. Now that the marriage won't happen, shouldn't she return it to me?" The reporters all showed surprise. They originally thought Clifton was just a pitiful cancer patient, but they hadn't expected this childhood couple to be secretly involved. If it were them, they certainly wouldn't let this pair of scoundrels off the hook. In an instant, all eyes turned to Jessica and Clifton, filled with disdain. "It's not like that." Seeing the situation turn against them, Jessica knelt before me with tears in her eyes. "It's not like that. Harold, let me explain. You know Clifton is dying. I just wanted to fulfill his last wish." "Harold, Sometimes I really don't understand why you insist on quarreling with someone who's about to die. I took out my phone and pulled up her posts from her alternate social media account, sneering. Jessica, you're being too subtle. This is probably your wish too. What do you mean, after tonight, you'll bury your love deep in your heart? What do you take me for, a fool? It's not like that, Harold. Jessica's face turned pale when she saw her alternate account. I love you. Jessica panicked and grabbed my arm as I turned to leave. I coldly shook off Jessica's hand. Your love is no longer important to me. With that, I left the police station. Jessica tried to chase after me, but countless cameras were already focused on them. Back home, my parents heard about my situation from the news. My mom made me my favorite pear soup. All right, calm your anger, son. Don't think too much about a woman like Jessica Edwards. Look on the bright side. A blessing in disguise. At least I discovered a woman as malicious as Jessica early on. If I found out later, that would be disastrous. Mom! I couldn't help but choke on my words. In my last life, I was so foolish to lose my life over a woman like Jessica. My parents have only me as their son. I wonder how they managed after I died in my last life. Stop crying. Didn't your dad teach you that a man should not shed tears? If the Edwards family dares to treat you like this, your dad won't let them off. No need, Dad. This time, I will make the Edwards family and Jessica suffer irreparably. Thinking of the pain I endured when I died in my last life, my eyes filled with hatred. The Edwards family caused a scene at the Lopez family's home to get back the $500,000. Jessica rushed over to plead for mercy, using the same moral coercion on her parents and brother. But it seems she forgot that her parents and brother were not moral people. Her pleas went unheard, and Jessica ended up getting slapped by her own mother, leaving her bruised and battered. But no matter how badly Jessica was beaten by the Edwards family, the Lopez family insisted that the money was a gift from Jessica to their son. The Lopez family claimed the $500,000 had already been given to the hospital, so it couldn't be returned. No matter how badly Jessica was beaten by her family, the supposedly loving Clifton would hide behind his family whenever money was mentioned, refusing to show his face at the hospital. But the Edwards family was not to be underestimated. They realized that using Jessica Edwards to threaten Clifton Lopez was useless. They directly caused a scene in the hospital, beating up the Lopez couple, and even Clifton, who was on the hospital bed, couldn't escape unscathed. Evil people only become more ruthless. With no other choice, Clifton Lopez could only return $500,000 to the Edwards family. On the day Jessica came to return the $800,000 to me, her eyes were filled with hatred towards me. Harold, is this what you wanted? Have you really found joy in ruining me? Is this the love you once had for me? I scoffed. Jessica Edwards, do you even deserve to mention love? The biggest regret of my life is that I was blinded by so-called love and fell for you. Harold, I know you hate me, but if you take this $500,000 back, Clifton might really die. If something happens to Clifton, can you really live with yourself? Jessica looked at me, heartbroken. I shrugged. What does that have to do with me? Clifton's illness isn't my doing. Since you insist on marrying a so-called good man, why not just marry Mithraea while you're at it? You, Harold, don't regret this. Even if you beg for my forgiveness in the future, I won't forgive you. Jessica's eyes turned red with anger as she turned to leave, but her steps slowed, as if she was waiting for me to stop her. Just leave quickly, or I'll call security. My voice was icy cold. Jessica wiped her tears and ran away. With no surgical fees and no suitable liver donor, Clifton's health deteriorated further. Meanwhile, Jessica posted heartfelt pictures on social media every day, sitting by Clifton's hospital bed, hoping for a miracle. But as Clifton's condition worsened, Jessica's posts grew increasingly desperate. I never expected Jessica to have such thick skin that she would kneel in front of my company, begging me for money to help Clifton. In front of the tech building, Jessica bit her lip and knelt on the ground, attracting strange looks from passers-by. I couldn't believe she was willing to trample her own dignity into the dirt for Clifton. Seeing this scene, I felt even more that I had been too foolish in my past life, sacrificing money and even my life for a woman who wasn't worth it at all. Started pouring rain outside. I sat in my luxury car, passing by Jessica without a glance, but I rolled down the window to glance at her coldly. She instantly looked as if struck by lightning, her face pale as she collapsed to the ground. Another one of her pathetic acts. Unfortunately, whether in my past life or this one, Jessica was too foolish to understand. Such lowly tactics only worked on those who cared about her. But in this life, I had long stopped caring. Passersby called 120, sending Jessica to the hospital. For a while, Jessica finally gave up and stopped looking for me. Perhaps the heavens wanted to spare Clifton's life. He found a suitable liver donor. In order to save Clifton, Jessica deceived her father into selling their house to gather the funds for Clifton's surgery. By the time the Edwards family realized what had happened, it was too late. Jessica was naturally beaten half to death, but she still believed that once Clifton recovered, he would give her the life of her dreams. Meanwhile, my revenge plan was coming to a close. The Edwards father and son had been obsessed with stocks for many years, making easy money all thanks to my inside information. It was incredibly easy for me to trap them in their own stocks and bankrupt them. I merely set up a small scheme in the stock market, and the greedy Edwards father and son invested all their assets into it. By the time they realized something was wrong and tried to sell their stocks, it was already too late. Clifton's liver transplant surgery was a success, but the Edwards family went bankrupt. The father and son, in their quest to make a fortune in the stock market, borrowed a large sum of money from loan sharks. However, their dreams of sudden wealth shattered, and to repay their debts, the father decided to marry Jessica to a man old enough to be her father, who had even killed several wives before, just for the $30,000 dowry he offered. Jessica naturally refused. With no way out, she ultimately came to me for help. Kneeling in front of me, fear made her tremble. "Harold, please save me. You're the only one who can help me now. My parents have gone crazy. If I really marry that man, I will die. I'm still so young, please. You're the only one who can help me. Please, for the sake of our past feelings, can you lend me some money?" Hearing Jessica's words was like hearing a joke. "What about Clifton? You sold your house for him. Doesn't he care about you?" Harold, you know Clifton just finished his surgery. Harold, you have so much money. If you could just give me a little, even just a bit, wouldn't that help me?" Jessica looked at me with tears in her eyes. I was almost laughing at her reasoning. According to her logic, having money meant being a fool who had to help everyone. I had the security throw Jessica out. Just as the security guard was about to drag her away, Jessica Edwards still tightly gripped my hand. "I don't believe it, Harold Smith. Are you really willing to let me marry someone else?" "Harold, please, I was wrong. Okay? I'm begging you. Just help me one more time." Hearing Jessica's humble plea, I suddenly recalled the last life when I was beaten bloody by robbers, and I had also set aside my dignity, begging Jessica to look at me. But no matter how many times I called out, I only saw Jessica supporting Clifton Lopez's back as he walked further away from me, never looking back. "Hey, Jessica Edwards, you deserve this. Do you understand?" I coldly stepped on Jessica's hand. "Harold." Jessica winced in pain, her brow furrowed. "Does it hurt?" I laughed coldly, but Jessica didn't understand. What she faced now was merely a fraction of what I endured before my death in the last life. "Jessica Edwards, didn't you say that your love for Clifton is true? You always said I was the one standing in your way. Now that I'm gone, you can run to your true love. Harold, why do you have to humiliate me like this? Don't blame me for not reminding you. You've gone too far, and sooner or later you'll pay the price." After hearing my words, Jessica's expression didn't lighten. Instead, it darkened. "Price? Jessica Edwards? Do you think you're worthy?" I looked at her with disdain. Months later, the person I sent to keep an eye on Jessica brought back news. He said that Jessica had married the man arranged by the Edwards family and was living an unhappy married life. She was often beaten black and blue, and the Edwards family now relied on their old son-in-law for survival, not daring to speak up even when they saw Jessica severely injured. Jessica's father, mother, and brother sometimes scolded her, saying her temper was too hard and that she wouldn't soften her words, which led to being beaten by men. Jessica's life was like hell, but what I didn't expect was that after marriage, she still had connections with Clifton. They had even started plotting how to kill her husband to seize his wealth. Naturally, I wouldn't let this pair of scoundrels live happily. Right after Jessica and Clifton devised their murder plan, I immediately had someone leak it to Jessica's current husband. Clifton's legs were broken on the spot, and Jessica was almost beaten to death. Originally, this kind of life was already the hell I arranged for Jessica. Just as I was about to stop, I didn't expect Jessica, in a desperate situation, to once again target me with her schemes. Perhaps even in rebirth, I could never escape the cycle of cause and effect. Jessica actually hired someone to kidnap me, and the person who kidnapped me was the same robber who tortured me in my previous life. In an abandoned warehouse, I was tightly bound to a pillar. Harold, I've told you, this is all your fault. Why can't you be like in the last life? I've already admitted my mistakes. You should forgive me. Jessica leaned closer, whispering. Upon hearing this, I couldn't help but reveal my surprise. Jessica had actually also been reborn, but Jessica, disregarding my astonishment, continued talking, crying and laughing, looking quite terrifying. Harold, do you know? After you died, I regretted it. I didn't want to kill you. I just wanted to save Clifton first and then call the police to save you. But things didn't go as planned, and you died. Harold, Jessica covered her chest in despair. Do you know how regretful and heartbroken I was after your death? Regret? Don't you have Clifton? How could you be sad? I smirked coldly. Little did I know, the reborn Jessica suddenly got enraged at the mention of Clifton. Don't mention him. He's just a hypocritical scoundrel. Harold, you don't know how much I suffered after you died. Clifton didn't love me. He loved the wealth you left behind. After you died, he tricked me into marrying him, and then he changed completely, fooling around outside. Later, to openly seize the inheritance you left me, he deliberately tampered with my car, and I watched as it caught fire, burning me alive inside. At this point, Jessica's eyes turned, filled with hatred for Clifton. Since you regret it, why are you kidnapping me again? I asked Jessica this puzzling question. Jessica sighed. Harold, because I was reborn too late. I don't know why, but when I was reborn, I didn't marry you. I married someone else. He beat me half to death, and then I regained my memories from my last life. That's when I guessed you were also reborn. Because you, Harold, were reborn. Everything is different from the last life. I want everything to be the same as last time. As she said this, Jessica was filled with obsession, pointing at the robber and whispering, So I want that man to kill you once more. Maybe everything can be reshuffled, and I can be reborn again. Harold. Jessica Edwards raised her hand to gently caress my face, her eyes filled with affection and tenderness. This was once what I desired the most, but now it sent chills down my spine. Don't worry, Harold Smith. This time I will be reborn too when we just got married. I definitely won't let those blood-sucking relatives make you give my brother an extra 100,000 in gifts. If I could do it all over again, I would only love you. Hearing Jessica's words, I couldn't help but mock her. You say you will love me. Jessica Edwards, aren't you being a bit too arrogant? Have you ever asked me if I would love you? No matter how many times we start over, it's already over between us. No. As long as we can start over, you will definitely fall in love with me. Jessica's eyes were filled with a strange obsession. After saying this, she coldly commanded the robber, Go kill him, using your favorite method. Not a single detail can be off. The kidnapper's eyes flashed with a bloodthirsty look that I was all too familiar with from my past life. Though Jessica was reluctant, She still turned her head away, planning to escape from the scene of my death. Harold, don't blame me. I'm just correcting my mistake. But her plans were destined to fail. Just as the kidnapper picked up the knife, countless police officers rushed in and surrounded them. How could this happen? Jessica's gaze was both confused and panicked. After the police untied me, I looked at Jessica with indifferent eyes. Jessica Edwards, you can't really think your so-called plan is flawless, can you? Why are you doing this to me, Harold? You know that everything I do is just because I love you. Jessica shouted at me hoarsely. I instinctively snorted coldly. Love? Admit it, Jessica Edwards. People like you only ever love themselves. The police took Jessica away. In the interrogation room, Jessica kept repeating to the police that she was reborn. Her fate shouldn't be like this. The police thought she must be insane. Meanwhile, other officers discovered the bodies of Clifton Lopez and her current husband in Jessica's home. When the police asked about her motive for murder, Jessica's expression was both pained and frenzied. They forced me. They deceived me, killed me, and tormented me. They are all demons. They all deserve to die. Jessica was arrested and imprisoned. However, she constantly requested to see me once before her death. I went. In the prison, I coldly watched Jessica confess. Jessica looked up at me with tear-stained eyes. Her voice choked. Harold, why are you doing this to me? This shouldn't be how you look at me. You are clearly the person who loves me the most in this world. But why don't you love me anymore? Harold, do you know how happy I was the moment I found out I was reborn? I finally have the chance to win you back. But heaven has been too unfair to me. Harold, if I could be reborn before all the mistakes began, could you still forgive me? Jessica's gaze toward me was filled with humility and pleading. Harold, forgive me. It was only after you died that I realized how much I loved you. That's impossible. Jessica Edwards, some things happen and they have already happened. No matter how much you regret it, you can't go back. I shook my head with a bitter smile. And, Jessica, you should know that a fool like me can only love you once. Once you're gone, you can never get it back. I'm sorry. My tone was extremely flat. Jessica, handcuffed and sitting behind the iron bars, cried until her face was soaked with tears. I didn't look at Jessica again and turned to leave. At the prison gate, I looked up, feeling the sunlight fall on me. At that moment, I completely let go and ran toward a more meaningful life.